Good evening, everyone. Whoop. Well, you're going to see nothing but reflection. And welcome to Bhagavad-gita Satsang once again. And this will be an adventure in having a guest. Pranada, would you do me the favor of turning your camera back on? There you are. I'm very, very happy to have as my guest Pranada Comtois, the author of Wise Love, Bhakti and the Search for the Soul of Consciousness. So Pranada, welcome. You have your microphone turned on? Yeah, so.
That we could need to turn on.
Okay. And so let's take care of a little bit of housekeeping, as is our usual habit. Those of you who are here, thank you very much. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be here with you. And if you would do me the favor of raising your hand if you can hear. Okay, now that was how you could hear me. Now please, everyone, take your hands back down. And raise them again if you can hear Pranada. Pranada, would you please give us a test?
Good to be here with you.
All right, everybody can hear you except for me. So I am going to remedy that by getting my earbuds. So everyone hang out for just a second. All right, everyone got a little darshan of Sri Chaitanya sitting behind me. So that was a good thing, I suppose. All right, let's try this. We did, by the way, rehearse this. I know it's hard to believe, but Pranada, please talk to me.
Hi, Hari-kirtana.
Yay, now I can hear you. All right, so a idiosyncrasy of my microphone. All right. So now we'll go back to sharing our screen and get everyone up to speed. We've already taken care of some of our housekeeping. You all know that where your audio settings are, your viewing options are. Don't worry about your microphone or your camera because you can see and hear us, but we cannot hear or see you. And speaking of hearing, Pranada, is there a way for you to turn your microphone volume up? Your input volume up at all? Okay, while you're looking for that, please type into the Q&A anytime you have a question or a comment, and we will be on the lookout for your questions and comments. Last class, Chapter 7, the Yoga of Knowledge and Realization. We covered verses 13 through 19, which spoke about how one is deluded by divine energy. 4 kinds of people who are averse to saintliness. Those who are foolish, those who are the lowest of mankind, those whose knowledge has been stolen by illusion, and those who have acquiesced to an ungodly nature. We also spoke about 4 kinds of saintly people, those who are in distress and find that to be impetus for their spiritual life, those who are seeking knowledge, those who are seeking wealth, and those who have obtained knowledge. So those are our 4 kinds of saintly people. And interesting to note that even one with material desires, such as seeking wealth, counts as a saintly person when their material desires become impetus for spiritual attainment. This evening, we're going to speak about spiritual form in juxtaposition to material form, the masculine and feminine aspects of divinity, the divine feminine and the feminine divine. and what the difference is between those two. We will also, in the course of speaking about this, speak about two different kinds of feminine energies, Maya Shakti and Bhakti Shakti, two different aspects of feminine energy. And that is what we'll do this evening. My guest this evening, as you have already ascertained, Pranada Comtois, author of this wonderful book, and we'll talk a little bit more about Pranada's book during the course of the evening. But first, our invocation mantra. I chant, you chant back. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. All right, last week's key verses. We looked at 7:14. My divine power of illusion, composed of the qualities of material nature, is nearly impossible to overcome. But those who offer themselves to me can easily cross beyond this bewildering power. One of the things I spoke about in connection with this verse is the idea that the material energy works fully under the direction of the Supreme Person, like a dancer following her partner, or a shadow moving in accordance with the movements of the object. So we're going to come back to this idea of what kind of dance is going on here between the material energy and the Supreme Person who is the controller of the material energy. And then 7:19, after many births, those in possession of knowledge approach me with the realization that, quote, Vasudev is the source and substance of all that is, unquote. Such a great soul is rarely seen. Vasudev having a double meaning, indicating the one who is all-pervasive, but also Vasudev is a patronymic indicating the son of Vasudev, which in this case is Krishna, the speaker of the Bhagavad-gita. So in this verse, the point here was that jnana, or knowledge, develops into bhakti with the help of time and the association of pure devotees, those who actually are in possession of devotion and therefore can give devotion to others, can bestow it upon others. So one of the things I really like about Pranada's book is that bhakti is often thought of as being feeling and not so much knowledge. And what Pranada has done in her book, which I want to talk about now just a little bit more, is provided us with the knowledge that forms the foundation of bhakti, that actually makes the feeling substantive beyond subjective experience. So with that in mind, let me just change my view here. And ask Pranada to please say a little bit more about her book. So hold on for just a second while I change the view. All right, active speaker. Pranada, thank you very much for joining us this evening and being here with me and being here with everyone else. I very much appreciate your taking the time to come and hang with us and share your perspective on these verses from the Bhagavad-gita. Just a few things about your book. The concise and comprehensive exploration of the philosophy and practice of Bhakti Yoga Now, for those of you out there in webinar land, Pranada's wisdom that she offers all of us in her book comes from having spent 20 years living as a contemplative in bhakti yoga ashrams, and then another 20 years on top of that in the practical application of the principles of bhakti while running two multi-million-dollar businesses. Her writing has appeared, in addition to her book, her writing has appeared in various online and print publications, including Journey of the Heart, Bhakti Blossoms, an anthology of poetry, and Goddess, When She Rules. She's also a featured speaker in the film Women of Bhakti, which I will put a link to in the resources that I send your way in the newsletter. So, Pranada, please tell us why you wrote Wise Love.
I wanted to share the love affair I have with Bhakti, and which is, as you described, a 40-year exploration practice. I find myself, I call myself a pilgrim. And it's quite a journey. It's a beautiful heart journey to go into what Krishna has given us in the Bhagavad-gita, to understand what is the essence of Bhakti Yoga. And I have read extensively into different traditions and found threads of Bhakti everywhere, but there were just pieces here and pieces there. And I wanted to bring out the really amazing potential of what Bhakti offers us as individuals. So I felt, and of course I didn't see such a book in out there to describe it. I mean, we have beautiful source texts like the Bhagavad-gita, and I drew on heavily from the Bhagavad-gita as well as other Bhakti texts. And I wanted to make it concise and relatable, do some translation work for people that aren't familiar with the philosophy. And I just felt I wanted to share that.
Awesome. Well, we're so glad that you did.
Yeah.
How was the process for you? How did the process of writing Wise Love unfold for you?
Well, I had the idea that I wanted to speak to my American sisters and brothers and share an aspect of Indian philosophy that is new to Western shores. It has not been highlighted as much as Advaita Vedanta or the impersonal and oneness aspect of the absolute. So actually, it was a very arduous process in one sense, because I was praying about it for years and years, how I could share it in using what vocabulary, and how to help people enter into it and have an objective view of the philosophies of India, so that they were empowered to make their own decisions about a path that they might like to take if they were interested in Eastern philosophy. And once there was a breakthrough at some point, it actually flowed a little easy.
Yes, I'm acquainted with that feeling of, hitting that breakthrough point, and all the work that goes into just getting to that breakthrough point. So
it's not a matter of just sitting down and writing. There's a whole transformation of the heart when you're writing on a topic of profound spiritual matter.
Which brings me to another question. What do you think about the relationship between writing and realization of what you're writing about? Do you think that this is a nice, a helpful part of developing an understanding of like an experiential understanding of Bhakti philosophy?
Absolutely. I mean, we can look at examples of even mundane writing, or writing outside this very direct spiritual path. Say we're writing about psychology, so some self-help, or we're writing a memoir. Everyone wants to write a memoir. those who are young, say they're in their 20s, they might write a memoir. There's not always that kind of deep substance to it as someone who's 60, 70, 80, who's writing a memoir and has gained wisdom through the experience and a whole body of experience, or through a self-help book that someone has personally had some experience that they want to share. So even more so with a spiritual topic, there has to be to really transfer from one's heart to another heart, there has to be experience. It has to be grounded in that experience. And there's nothing short of time and practice that qualifies one to do that. So I would say absolutely, especially we see it even in non-spiritual subjects, but especially in a spiritual topic like bhakti.
Okay. So this is good encouragement for anyone who is studying the Bhagavad-gita or engaged in the practice of bhakti yoga to write for the sake of realization, irrespective of the level of experience that they currently have or such like that.
Now, one thing about practice is there's a practice, there's thinking about philosophy, there's contemplating it, there's speaking it, there's different levels of communicating. And when you have to write or speak, you're going to gain a lot more insight about your practice, about the philosophy. So yes, writing really helps that. It nurtures it, it deepens it, it makes you wrestle with things you didn't even think about until you start writing them down and you say, well, that doesn't make sense. Why do I even believe that? So then you have to investigate why you believe that. And what does that do? That strengthens the intelligence. It solidifies faith, which is trust in the path that you're taking.
Okay. I'm going to hold on for just a second because I'm getting some info from our participants to the effect that you're not always visible, and I just want to make sure I've got that problem solved before we go forward. Trying a couple of different changes in the program, so I just want to make sure that let's do this. Let's look at our participants. Participants, if you can see Pranada full screen right now, could you please raise your hands? And if you can see me, but not Pranada, then please raise your hand. Okay. So even though I see you full screen, you are invisible to our audience.
In my view, I see you full screen and I have a little tiny screen on top of your.
Right, so you're seeing what the host sees, which is what we both are. So let's just see if there is.
How about trying a side-by-side view?
I'll try that. Let's just exit let's go to gallery screen. Okay, so now, participants, do you see the two of us side by side? Please raise your hand if you do.
I didn't see a change in my screen.
Ah, okay. I heard a nice chime. Okay, so much to my chagrin and dismay, every single view that I have attempted has me speaking to an invisible you. And I'm not really sure why that would be. Oh, someone says that you are on now.
I just pressed gallery view on my side.
Ah, okay. Then that probably solved our problem. Okay, very good. This is the perils of trying something new. Okay, so now hopefully that has been resolved, and we will move forward. So I'm going to.
Can you hear me, Hari?
Yes, yeah, I can still hear you.
You want to check with people now?
All right, so everyone sees both of us. Please raise your hand, and hears both of us. Please raise your hands. No. Once again, only me at 8:21. So this is something that we solved for a moment and have once again not solved. All right, so I'm in gallery view. And once again, and then this is the last time I will ask everyone for feedback, because if necessary, we will simply move on from an audio standpoint. So everyone should be seeing us side by side right now. And one more time, please let me know if that is in fact the case. It switched to her once in a while, but not visible now. See if it switches to you when you are speaking.
Yeah, no, it's not doing that. I just pressed the gallery. Oh, okay. Now I have side by side on my first time.
So here's what's happening. When I am speaking, they only see me, and when you are speaking, they only see you.
That's fine.
Okay. Okay.
Fine with me. I don't know about for you.
No. I'm seeing now that there's a little cue that tells me that in this view we're switching back and forth depending on who is speaking, and I think that will be fine for now. So here's what we're going to do as we move forward. I'm going to share my screen once again, and we will move into the translations and commentaries for this week's verses, and I will, as is our usual habit, just read through the translations. Then we will go back to each verse and discuss some things in detail, and I will have some specific questions that we'll discuss, that Pranada and I will discuss. So here we go. Those whose knowledge, this is now chapter 7, verse number 20, those whose knowledge has been stolen by material desires approach other deities. Following various rules of ritualistic observances, they are ruled by their own worldly nature. To whoever wishes to be thus devoted, I provide the conviction required for faithful worship of whatever form of deity they choose. Text 22. Endowed with such faith, they worship a particular demigod and obtain their desires, though the fulfillment of their desires is actually bestowed by me alone. 23. The fruits of worship obtained by those of lesser acumen are fleeting. The worshippers of the demigods go to the demigods, but my devotees come to me. And text 24 is the verse that we are going to chant. So I will chant the Sanskrit and ask you to chant back. For those of you who are new to transliterated Sanskrit, the dot over an M means that you close your lips in front, but also the back of your tongue to the roof of your mouth, as if you were wrapping your mouth around a little walnut. A bar across a vowel means an open and elongated version of that vowel. So in the case of the last word of the first line, it would be an ah instead of an uh. A dot at the bottom of an H at the end of a word at the end of the line means that you echo the preceding vowel back. And this verse does not have any other diacritical marks, the cues that give you an idea of what the pronunciation should be. So, one line at a time, I chant, and then you chant back. Avyaktam vyaktim apanam
Yaktam yaktam apanam
manyate mam abudhayaha
manyate mam abudhaya
param bhavam ajananto
ram bhavam jananto
mamavyayam anuttamam.
mabhavam.
Translation: unaware of my higher nature, which is eternal and supreme, those who are less intelligent think of me as a formless existence that has assumed a visible personality. We will focus very specifically on this verse this evening. And then, verse 25, I do not reveal myself to everyone, being hidden by my divine power of illusion. This bewildered world does not recognize me, who am unborn and infallible. Those are our verses for this evening. So, here's what I would like to discuss. Krishna is clearly saying here that he is beyond both the demigods and the impersonal feature of divinity that's beyond the demigods. Yet many people have the idea that Krishna is one of many gods or many demigods that perform the function of giving form to that which is formless. So why do you think the idea of spiritual form, or the notion that Krishna's form is categorically different from material form, is so hard for people to understand or accept?
That's a question to me, right?
That's a question to you. Yes, my audience is accustomed to my asking them questions, but they're off the hook this time. This time my questions are for you.
All right. Because I think the reason why we have trouble with it is because we don't understand the nature of consciousness. Consciousness creates form. Just like in this world, I can throw a vase on my potter's wheel. I can build a home. I can build a car, table. I build forms. I create things. So forms are wonderful. They're useful. But they're also really problematic. And what is the problem with form? Well, it limits. So I can't go everywhere. I can't do everything that I want to do. I don't like that limiting aspect of form. There's another problem, which is a little more problematic, and that is I become attached to form. I become attached to my things, but they don't stay, they go. So it's always that I'm trying to hold on to the form, and the form goes away. That's painful, and it becomes a distressing nature of our experience in the world to have forms taken from us, even forms of relationships where we have a relationship with somebody and it ends, and it's excruciating, the pain of losing our loved ones. Besides that, we have a limit, that it's painful. Philosophers and thinkers consider, well, if all this is well, before that, forms create disharmony. I have a form which has desires, and it's opposed to your form and your desires. So even though we have this sense that underlying everything there should be a unity, we see disharmony and disunity, and it's because of form. So forms create that. we become attached, we lose it, and it's limiting. So philosophers and thinkers consider this, and they think form is a problem. So it can't be, it can't play within the spiritual realm because there's no problems in spirit. So understandably then, we'll look at that and we'll say, okay, so then since form is such a problem, and material form is such a problem, once we dispense a form, we dispense with those problems. So it must be the nature of spirit to be formless in its ultimate instance. But there's a logical fallacy with this thinking. And it goes something like this. Well, if consciousness can create form in the material world, which is its foreign place of resonance, it has more power, not less power, to create form in its own place, in the world of consciousness, in the spiritual world. And what is that form constituted of? It's consciousness constituted. And what is consciousness? Consciousness is spirit. So consciousness constituted form is enduring, doesn't end. It's harmonious, it doesn't create disunity. It has function. And the beautiful nature of that function specifically, when we look at the nature of consciousness as being Sat Chidananda, eternal, not knowing and loving, is that consciousness has the form of love. Love has a form, it has a shape in order to express itself. So those arguments for spiritual form are logically, they make sense. It's like, okay, I can accept that. And then of course we have Krishna himself saying in the Bhagavad-gita, I'm the basis of formless Brahman. This verse we just heard now, but there's also even stronger language in the 14th chapter that you'll come to, that form is the basis of non-form. So non-form comes out of form, actually, not the other way around. And one of the reasons why that's so, if you think about it, how sophisticated is non-form? How much more sophisticated is form in what it can do, how it can express itself, the variegatedness of it, what's possible with form? Because form does have a function. I might say a glass limits water, but a glass or a jug will hold water that I can carry places, that I can drink, that normally don't have water. So form has function. You can't just say form is limiting, therefore dispense of it. No, it has function. And what's its function? So as Krishna is describing, he's the foundation of the non-form of the absolute. And by nature, form is more complex, more variegated than non-form. So that's a higher actual manifestation of consciousness, is its variegated forms, and especially its shape of love. So we come now to our second problem that we have with form. Mm-hmm. You're introduced at that point to Krishna. We're introduced to God. God has a form, and he has a form that has desires, and and he's greater than I am. So all of a sudden, then I can't have everything just all my way. I don't like that. So let's just dispense of this possible personal relationship with God and that form, because it impinges on what I want to do. But actually, we're turning away. It's the rub, and we're retreating right at the threshold where we could actually touch this extraordinary experience of consciousness's form of love, that Krishna has form, I have form, and there's a form between us that's love that can be developed. Now Krishna, all he's doing is saying, hey, do these things so that you can develop love for me, that we can interact in a relationship together. We go, wow, I think not. And so we just dismiss Krishna's form. So I think that's what's going on in the philosophy and the spiritual thought. regarding form.
Okay, so we have then two issues with form, one of which is intellectual and the other is psychological or emotional. Now, tell me what you think of this, because from a logical standpoint, there's a lot of evolution theory that accepts this idea. It's kind of a meta-scientific idea, but it's accepted just the same, at least from a theoretical standpoint, that a lower information system can give rise to a higher information system. And then in evolutionary theology, the kind of theology that speaks about how the universe is the evolution of God coming to the point of ultimate completion, of ultimate godness, is the idea that the same thing, you know, lower information content beings like human beings evolve into higher information content beings that ultimately somewhere down the road culminate in the fulfillment of God becoming itself. Any of this make any sense to you?
Well, yes and no. A couple things. One is, well, on your second point, how this could be that God is coming to his higher manifestation through the expression of creation. It's a very human-centric thought to think that creation is the best that God can do and that there's nothing more than material creation. It seems a very impoverished idea that this is the best that God can do. Actually, he does a lot better. He has a whole realm, variegated, which is where the creation, the shadow of what we see is going on here is a shadow from the spiritual world, the variegatedness of the spiritual world. But there aren't the limitations of time and space and personal desire conflicting with other personal desire. It's a harmonious diversity where full expression of each individual is given space, and it's a loving environment. So anyway, that's just a thought on this idea that the creation is like the highest manifestation of God. But I mean, in terms of philosophers of mind, scientists, they have good reason to say that, to contemplate that from lower forms can come higher forms. Some appears that way in Darwin's theory of evolution, and in other aspects of their research, it shows that way. But ultimately, in simple common sense terms, is a table one day going to say, ouch? No. I mean, I can hit the table. It's not going to one day say, ouch. I know that. And it's not going to take me becoming a scientist to be able to state that. So, and I state that not only just on my opinion, but based on the Vedic texts that are quite sophisticated in their explanation of what consciousness is. And here again, I think this idea that from lower can come higher is a simple misunderstanding of consciousness again. What is spirit? It's different from matter. It is what is giving life to matter. What gives movement to matter. It's what's creating the shapes. It's what's giving the form and names and the variety. It's not that matter itself is bubbling up and creating these things.
All right, that's logical. And that brings us into a little more complex discussion of matter and material energy and consciousness behind the material energy. Because on the one hand, like you said, you know, matter doesn't do anything unless it's animated by consciousness. And yet we find the idea here that the material energy has an effect on us, which means there must be some other consciousness associated with the material world in order for that to happen. So let's just talk a little bit about that. I in the last class, spoke about the material energy, and you heard me repeat this earlier on this evening, that the material energy works under the direction of the Supreme Lord like a dancer following her partner. So can you talk a little bit about this other aspect of consciousness behind the material energy?
Yeah, it's described. There's supreme consciousness and there's finite consciousness. There's small units of consciousness. So we're small units of consciousness, and we have our source in supreme consciousness, supreme divine consciousness, all pervading, powerful consciousness from which we're created, the material world is created, and everything that we experience is created. So it's just a simple answer. It's God is the supreme consciousness, the source, the root of our little consciousness, like rays of the sun. The sun has rays, so God is like the sun, and we're like the rays of the sun. The rays of the sun have no existence outside the existence of the sun. So it's simple.
Okay.
God is behind our small consciousness, and when we connect with supreme consciousness, then we find we have our full potential open to us in ways that are never available to us when we're only turning to our own means, our own thoughts, our own plans, and the limiting nature of this world, of material forms. I mean, in that sense, it's right. Material forms are limited and limiting and distressing and create problem. That's no question. We have no issue with that. But to say, therefore, that spiritual form doesn't exist or that is inferior to non-form falls short in its logical conclusion.
Okay. So as forms of divinity go, there are plenty of people who, for any number of reasons, aren't so as comfortable with a male form as the supreme deity, and are therefore more inclined to look to the goddess in her various forms or incarnations. And I'd like to talk a little bit about that, because we have two different kinds of illusion. Krishna speaks about being hidden behind his divine power of illusion. And there's the kind of illusion that hides the supreme person from our view, but there's another kind of illusion that actually facilitates the kind of connection to divinity that you're speaking of. And each of these is a manifestation of feminine divine energy. So I'm wondering if you would talk a little bit about that and make that distinction between divine feminine and feminine divine.
Sure. Your first point is, why are some of us opposed to the idea of a male Godhead? I think it's just natural psychology. Women have been abused and disrespected for millennia, and it gets tiring, it gets boring, and it's wrong. So but then we take a material conception of this imbalance and disempowerment and try to place it in the spiritual atmosphere. But it's not translatable there. It's an experience in this world where men have a tendency to overlord women, try to control them. And we see a lot of the harm that's created in society and for the individual in patriarchal religion and society. And it's all, I mean, it's there, we see it, it's known. So, but that doesn't mean that applies to spirit, because spirit has completely different characteristics than what we're used to experiencing. So we get these ideas and then try to project them onto spirit it's just not helpful. So I think that's, plays into a reason why we don't like the idea of a supreme Godhead as a male. But we don't have that problem with bhakti because we have a supreme goddess and a supreme god. So there's no problem there. And not only that, she's more powerful than he is.
Well, can you explain how that is?
Yeah, it's because of her love. Her absolute undying love for him actually bewilders him. He doesn't experience, he's loving and he loves everybody, but having the kind of love that Radha offers to him bewilders him. It's enchanting, it's charming, it's thoroughly takes him off of his game, so to speak, because he's God. He's supposed to be in control. He doesn't need it, but her love controls him. So that's theologically a very interesting concept, that above God is love and the lover of God. That's unique to bhakti. It's beautiful. That's one of the things that I wanted to share in Wise Love.
Right.
This is a very beautiful, extraordinary feature of bhakti.
So before you go on, I just need to ask you to define your terms, because you mentioned Radha. Radha does not appear anywhere in the Bhagavad-gita, at least not in any of the verses we've covered so far. So can you explain a little bit about who exactly you are speaking about, and what is her relationship to the Bhagavad-gita?
Yeah, her relationship to the Bhagavad-gita is, her relationship to the Gita, the Upanishads, the Puranas, is a bit hidden. She's there, and the commentaries will bring her out, but that's through pretty sophisticated study. You'll see her brought out, and in the Upanishads, she's known as Gandharvika. At any rate, she's Krishna's counter whole. She's non-different from Krishna. She's the heart of Krishna come out, although there's no such thing as point in time, but the heart of Krishna come out and manifest in a form. And it's this beautiful, exquisite, feminine, divine form that is the fountainhead of all the goddesses that we hear of the Indian tradition and all the other cultures in the world. She is the fountainhead from which all these goddesses emanate. So we should talk about Radha, Hari-kirtana, Bhagavad-gita or not. She is in the Bhagavad-gita. I mean, we're talking about bhakti. In Bhagavad-gita, in the beginning, the middle, the end, although Krishna is going through all these different yogas and he's giving you a perspective from all the different views of the yogas, he's clearly prefers bhakti. And at the very end, he says, Man manam mavabad bhaktot. Just think of me, surrender to me, worship me. So he's not hiding his preference for bhakti. And what is bhakti? Bhakti is Bhakti Devi. And who is Bhakti Devi? That's Radha. So she's in the Bhagavad Gita.
All right, so now here's the thing. One of the functions that someone who loves another may play is to shield them from those who don't love that same person so much. And here Krishna is speaking about how he hides. So who is Radha relative to the power of illusion that Krishna is hiding behind, so as to not be seen by those who are not interested in approaching him with devotion?
So in all the Indian philosophical systems, energy or Shakti is known as feminine. She's a goddess. There's different goddesses. And Maya Shakti is the material energy which covers, confuses, and keeps us from the knowledge of ourself and our relationship with our divine source. So Maya Shakti is an expansion, of Bhakti Shakti Radha. As I said, Radha is the fountainhead of all the goddesses, which are unlimited actually. So Maya's Shakti is to keep us where we want to be. We were just talking about, we don't like this idea of form, spiritual form, because it impinges on our own agenda if God's in the picture. Mm. So we want to be there. We want to stay covered. So Krishna allows that through his energy, Maya, material energy. That's what we were hearing, that he allows those whose intention is to worship the demigods so they can get things, they can get money, they can get relationships, they can get wealth and power. They do that by worshiping the demigods. So Krishna says, yeah, okay, here, this is how you do it. So that's through the Maya Shakti. But if we are bold and courageous, if we're given a little gift of intelligence that I'm a unit of consciousness, I have a relationship with my source, and I want to reestablish that and discover the form of real love, not the love that I see here, that I experience here, which is so painful and disappointing, but which I so want. If I want that, then Radha will give us mercy. Radha, in the name, if we call out Krishna's names, she will respond and give us mercy.
Okay. This is a pretty esoteric understanding. That is not when later in the Bhagavad-gita, Krishna, we're heading into the chapters that are specific to devotion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what we're going to find is Krishna is going to tell Arjuna that for those who are absorbed in thought of me and always chanting about me, I'm the one who gives the intelligence by which they can come to me. Mm-hmm. So how are we to understand that it is the feminine aspect of Krishna, his heart coming out?
That's it. That's passion.
Hmm?
He's calling to us. He's calling to us, and that's coming from his heart. So the manifestation of his heart is involved in reaching out to us. That's Radha.
Mm. Okay. So tell me a little bit, let's now circle back to Wise Love, to your book. You focus on making these kind of esoteric aspects of Bhakti philosophy accessible. Your stories and examples are wonderful in that they bring out pretty deep philosophical points of Bhakti theology. And so often, especially in modern yoga, where there hasn't been that much of a revelation of the philosophy of Bhakti, it comes off more as just feeling. So what's missing when we look for the feeling of Bhakti without the philosophy of Bhakti?
Well, you'll find that you can't sustain your practice. Life's hard. The mind is strong. There's a lot of competing interests for our attention, for our time. We have we've been here in this world a long, long time, and the conditioning, the impressions on our consciousness are indelible. They're actually indelible at this point. So in order to break free of those shackles that have us so carefully bound that we cannot exit the material world. It is impossible to exit here on our own accord. Does not happen. There's no way out. There's no special key. There's no digging out. It doesn't happen. So in order to carry us through by having us fully absorb ourselves in the practice, enter into the practice, and surrender, it needs to be grounded with understanding of who we are. What is this world? Who is our divine other? Why are we here? What is the method of getting out? Then that information will inform our practice. It'll make us strong. It'll strengthen the heart until the feelings are so well informed and the experience so developed that then the reason that has carried us takes us beyond to a trans-rational state of the spiritual state, which is a loving state. And love is not bound by law or rules. It's free of that, but it's not simple to get there. So it needs to be grounded.
So is that the big takeaway from the experience of reading Wise Love?
I hope so. I mean, that's one thing. I had more simple takeaway in mind. I just wanted to show the attractive nature of bhakti, the simple but the simple application and how to understand it, but also it's gems within the theological landscape that don't exist. I'm well read in a lot of philosophies, religions. I'm not a scholar. I'm not saying that, but I'm very well read. And bhakti philosophy has aspects of it that don't exist anywhere. And I just wanted to share them because they're just so far out. And so I would hope that if one of those things moves somebody, they say, hey, let me try this. Let me practice a little bit and see where it takes me, because ultimately it has to be an experience. It's a choice and it has to become an experience in order for us to sustain it.
Well, the fact that you have illuminated these points of bhakti philosophy in such a nice way so that we can find them, that they're present for us, given that they are not to be found in other philosophies of self-realization, is our great good fortune. So let me just wrap up by letting people know a little bit more about where to find your book. And if any of you have any questions while we're heading into the home stretch here, please go ahead and pop them into the Q&A. And if you have questions after the fact, I'll get to that in a moment. We have been speaking, we're in the home stretch of chapter 7, texts 20 through 25. This evening, we talked a little bit about spiritual form in juxtaposition to material form, and also the absence of form altogether. And we've been speaking about masculine and feminine aspects of divinity, Maya Shakti and Bhakti Shakti. So we've covered texts 20 through 25 in chapter 7. If you have any questions, now's a good time to pop them in the Q&A window, or if you have questions after the fact, you can send those questions to me at Hari-kirtana.com. I strongly recommend that you immediately after watching this class go to Amazon or another place where fine books of Bhakti philosophy are sold, and find yourself a copy of Wise Love, Bhakti and the Search for the Soul of Consciousness. It's also available as a Kindle ebook. It has not only gotten wonderful reviews, but it is also in a genuine award-winning book. So please go find it and read it. It arrives before Christmas. All right. And next week, I will be my own special guest. I guess I didn't really change that line. You're going to be stuck with me just all by my lonesome next week. Sorry. We're going to talk about original sin in the Bhagavad-gita, at least the Bhagavad-gita's version of it. We'll speak about knowledge of relationships and how to be all Om Shanti Shanti at the time of death. It's December. December is the month where years go to die. So we'll talk about death. It'll be perfect. All right. And dip. That's all, folks. Pranada Comtois. Thank you so much for being with me here this evening and sharing your knowledge and wisdom with regard to Bhakti Yoga and the verses in this chapter. We hope to have you back sometime.
Thanks, Hari-kirtana. It was a pleasure to see you again.
It's always a pleasure to see you. And for those of you out there in internet land, it's always a pleasure to see you. I look forward to seeing you next time and fielding your questions whenever they may arrive. So thank you for spending this time with me, and I look forward to seeing you all next time. Have a nice night.